children and young people, and then the people who work closely with them.
So particularly like teachers, youth workers, or say people even who work in organisations like Nikki, because they then can understand directly what children's needs actually are.
I think young people, because young people have the rights of an adult, but they still remember their experiences of being a child, because they're only out of the childhood stage. Obviously you need more experienced adults to be able to help them and facilitate that, but I think that they should be probably in the centre.
Speak up about issues that they face.
Join organisations, or even go into join organisations like Nikki to have a platform for their voice, or speak up, even say join your school council, speak up there and allow the teachers who can actually implement the changes in your, say, things like education or even the support for mental health in schools.
Especially now on social media there's a lot of activism, which does help because it really opens young people's eyes, considering they spend so much time on social media. But as well as that, I think communities now are very close-knit, and young people do play a big part in influencing the young people in their community and providing a nice environment, somewhere that's safe, and somewhere they feel that they aren't threatened, or they're not scared of being hurt.
Well, it's very important because we're the ones who face the issues that we face, and therefore we need to speak up about it, otherwise it's going to be like that forever, I'd say.
I think it's important as well that it's children and young people who actually act as the children's right defenders, because we understand it completely. So as much as adults may sympathise and understand, they're not the ones that's growing up in that exact generation, therefore it's better if the experience does come from a child or a young person who's having to actually go through the right that they're trying to defend. I, along with another girl, was up at Stormont with Kula, and we were up for a safeguarding event. So it was about implementing better protection and safeguarding of children and young people, which had already been implemented in the Republic of Ireland. And it was an amazing kind of event to be able to let me as a young person allow my views on what children's safeguarding rights really should be, and how we view it, and maybe what even the impact can be of safeguarding of children.
I think to negotiate or to put across ideas, you have to be reasonable. So coming in all guns blazing, telling them all your problems and expecting them to fix it isn't going to help. You have to come in with a clear mind and say, we need you help with this. And adults who are human rights defenders, we would trust them more, because we know that they have our best interests at heart, and then they can work together for a solution.
I'd say the most important thing is listen to the children that are telling you the things that they face.
Important for adults to give the children the platform for their voices to be heard, that they need to listen, and then they need to kind of give us a way to bring it forward to, say, the public or the people in charge who can actually make a difference, and then it can be listened to.
I think really in schools and in youth centres and in groups, you have to talk about it with your friends, and to let people know that, well, we're not living 30 years ago, we're living now, and it's time to move on, and it's time to see what really matters. And at the minute, children should be the focus of the government, because we are the future after all, even though that's really cringy. But no, I think that the children should be, I can play a part in encouraging other young people to speak out about injustices, or things that have happened in their life that they're not happy about, and they can go to organisations or wherever to make a complaint or to just tell them I've been treated unfairly, and this the organisation will just hopefully, I don't know, they'll sort it out.
Speak up to the adults who are like offering support, and then that means that if you tell them something, they're going to listen and they're going to understand and they're going to want to help.
Yeah, just give them your experiences and your thoughts on, say, what you feel that should be done to help protect them, because otherwise they aren't going to understand. So if you want something to be done, you're going to need to speak up about it and actually tell an adult what the problem is and what you think should be done. Well, growing up in Belfast, I would say it would be perhaps the view of what people find of you. So I grew up in West Belfast and I've lived in a working class area my entire life. So automatically when someone hears where I'm from, they kind of look and then they're like, they know they put you into this little like nationalist little bubble, and you're going to think this way and you're going to say this and you're going to hate one side of the community. And I think they need to have a better implementation of equality, and it's only going to really be able to come from children. As someone who was born not long after about a year and a half after the Good Friday Agreement was signed, you're going to need people to bring forward and kind of say what society then is like for us, and how it's different from now, even as us bringing forward living in a divided society, to maybe even what it was like for, say, our parents growing up in their generation of living in Northern Ireland. And that's why you need the young people to be the ones to come forward and actually talk about it.
Well, obviously compared to countries that aren't living in a post-conflict society, it is harder. It's harder because there are lots of barriers, especially to do with funding, because political parties will try and block funding if a certain program or if a certain program caters probably to one side of the community. Obviously you can understand that everything has to be equal, and that's good, but there are small steps to take before, I don't know, the clock starts working again.
Yeah, like you stick to your own area, even to this day you stick to your own area, and you do what you do, and you kind of almost as if live a different life to someone who probably only lives 10 minutes down the road from you. I always remember once my teacher saying to me, you could go the entire day and never encounter a Protestant. And I remember thinking I really could, because everything, my school's in a Catholic area, all the shops say I would only really have to use on a daily basis are all in Catholic areas. So for me, that became one thing. It's how do they ever actually expect us to move on when there still is that fear and divide in the society? And I think as well, like as like I said earlier, like when we were talking about the fear that every time I go into, even still to this day at like 18, I go in and I change my name every time I go into a Protestant area because of being threatened and harassed. Like when I was younger, even when I was doing like community groups, like cross community groups, I remember being like threatened at the age of 7 because my name was an Irish name and that it wasn't right and it wasn't allowed. So still to this day I kind of carry that fear, and I don't think it's ever really going to change, because I don't understand how the politicians can say about equality and moving forward when they're basically on the TV arguing all the time that about their differences and why they're so divided. And how can they really expect a young person to be, who's obviously impressionable and is going to look up to the people who is running their society and say, well, they don't get along, so then how am I supposed to get along with someone who's not from my community?
Well, there obviously is, but there's a load of reasons why, but there's, like, if you want peace, then people automatically assume, oh, I don't really know, but like there is.
Yeah, I think it's how people react to you, because sometimes maybe your opinion will then show perhaps how you were raised, or if sometimes you come forward as the way I was raised, I might view things differently, so I'm all in favour of LGBT plus rights, where someone from a different community might not be because of how they were raised. So I think it becomes then that way, it's how can I speak out and say, right, I'm a defender of children's rights when I can't even speak for someone who would be my exact same age but wasn't raised the same way as me. So I don't know what they feel, I don't know how perhaps they would react, and I think then that becomes the hard thing, whereas well, adults are going to need to support kids a lot more in helping them have that safe space to come forward and say this is what we feel needs to be done.
And then also, like, there's a fear of bringing up topics that are sensitive because the person might, like, very
Strongly agree or disagree with it.
agree or disagree, and then you don't want to start a huge conflict between just you two as two different people with different opinions. I think it's really good to have safe spaces like Nikki that you can go to and bring up these conversations in, and like not fear being called out because of your opinion, and people either agreeing or disagreeing respectfully.
Yeah, I think like especially being a part of the Nikki panel, it was that kind of safe space to come forward, and it wasn't that you felt you were being judged on even your age, your opinion, or especially like here of what background you were brought up in. It was that safe space where you could kind of say how you felt about it, and then people were actually listening to you and not just putting you down to being, oh, it's because you're from like that side of the community, then this is why you believe that. And it gave a space where we could say it and not feel the social pressure of our opinions and our kind of beliefs.
Well, I know for me especially, if I was to become in the public eye or something like that, my parents would be very worried about my future and how that would I be portrayed as a unionist or a nationalist, and how that would hold me back in the future. And I think like, parents are very afraid of not the community but the general idea that will go around about you, and especially your job opportunities in the future.
No, in my opinion, not really. I think especially the lack of an executive basically says, right, we're divided, so how can they expect then us to feel safe in being equal and being together when the executive is basically saying, well, I mean, we can't agree on this, this and this, so then you kind of think, well then how am I supposed to agree with someone who I don't really know on that and that. It becomes then a lot harder, and you don't feel then you have the support of like adults to kind of bring forward your opinions and defend the young people of Northern Ireland against other countries or just even other governments. You don't feel you have that security, and without really an assembly and an executive, it becomes even harder because you don't feel you have the protection or you have the grounds to become a defender of like children's rights. So like give a government, make a government have that platform for young people to come forward, because I would say a lot of countries and the young people, they might not always feel safe enough maybe to they don't feel that they have the protection of their government to actually come forward and say we need the kind of support to have our rights protected. I think the government needs to have a thing like a youth assembly, or even have more organisations such as like Nikki, where young people actually kind of come forward and say what they believe and what they think without the fear of an adult's reaction.
Yeah, because if you're just a single child who has an opinion that you don't know if anyone around you shares, and you want to speak up about it, you don't know if it's safe to do so, if you're going to be heard if you do it, and it can make you feel really alone. But if you have a support group for children who also believe this and who have adults backing them that can take it to government then and make things change, then it's always really reassuring.
Show that it's important to the government, and say even to the the country in general that a child's right should be protected, because you know as well in some countries maybe it's not as much enforced as other countries, but I do think that every child in every country should have that secure feeling that their rights, they can be a champion for their rights, and that their next door neighbour will also be a champion for their rights.
Oh, I think poverty is a huge barrier in becoming a children's rights defender. I think perhaps people in poverty would think that they're not good enough and that they won't be able to do it. Obviously, I don't know as well as some people might, but I think that young people who live in an unjust society should be encouraged to come forward, and they can't do that if they are being told that, well, the education system works against them, they feel like they're a failure, etc. But if I was to make a law, it would be that the 1% wouldn't have so much, and the rest of us, it would be divided a lot more equally.
If I was able to enforce one law in particular, it would be the removal of the reasonable chastisement, because I believe that in no such way should a parent or an adult should be allowed to use a physical type of punishment as if it's reasonable or it's legal, because it basically kind of leaves then a keyhole for larger abuse perhaps to step in, and it's going to resonate completely for the child, I think, throughout their life. And I think you can't resolve especially a case when they're older by hitting someone, so I think it's better to teach a child when they're young that it's not okay.
If I could make one law, it would be to remove all anti-LGBT laws from all countries around the world, as there are people in concentration camps in Russia, people whose sexuality and gender is illegal in their country, and who are being prosecuted just for loving people.